Usually we start out the spiritual path by having more of an exploratory phase where we are looking at the many different teachings that are out there. We get into a lot of different ideas because we suddenly realize that there's so much more to know about the spiritual side of life than what we were brought up with. So it's natural that we have a period where we're not necessarily so focused. We study many different things. But after some time, we usually focus on one particular teaching or one particular spiritual practice. And then we can have a period where we're very focused on practicing that. But then there comes another phase where we start shifting, as I've talked about before, from the outer path to the inner path. And we shift away from thinking that, for example, performing a special or a specific spiritual practice is going to automatically get us to whatever goal we have. And then we shift into realizing that the essence of the path really is to look at our psychology and overcome our reactionary patterns so we don't react. And as we go further into this more psychological phase, it can be very helpful to have the concept that we all have a certain personal story or a personal drama. And you can actually find quite a bit of teachings out there, even from psychologists who are not particularly spiritual, who talk about this. And it can be helpful for you to study it. But what I wanted to do here was just to introduce that idea that we have a certain story we are telling ourselves in our minds. And I've given teachings in previous videos about the subconscious selves that we create, the separate selves that we have. I've even said that there came a point where we went below the 48th level of consciousness. We went into this illusion that we are separate beings. And this means we now felt unwhole. We felt incomplete in ourselves. But in order to deal with this psychologically, deal with this sense of loss, we had to explain it. We simply had to come up with some kind of explanation for why this happened to us. And of course, when you are in separation, as I've explained, you can't really say, oh, I did this myself. I made these choices. It was my own choices that brought me below the 48th level of consciousness and into separation. This is the one thing you can't do when you are trapped in separation. So therefore, you have to come up with a story that explains why some external force made this happen to you. And this is beyond any kind of religion, any kind of spiritual teaching, any ideology. It's just something you are telling yourself. And you are probably not aware of it. I know that when I first heard about the concept, I wasn't aware of it at all. So it took me some time to actually look at myself and realize, oh yeah, behind all of the outer things that I believe or not believe, behind spiritual teachings I've studied, there's a certain psychological mechanism. There's a story that I'm telling myself. There's a drama that I'm outplaying in my own mind you. And when I started realizing this, it was really a breakthrough for me. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. It took years. And there were different layers of these dramas that I was outplaying. But it was very, very helpful to just have the concept. And so one way to get started on understanding this concept is that we can say, Shakespeare, 500 years ago, he said, all the world's a stage. So take that concept. There's a theater. And the world really is the theater. But what do you have in a theater? You have a play. And the play has a storyline. And there are several people involved with the play. And each person has a certain role in the play. And for each role, there's a story. There's a story of how that person is supposed to behave, why that person is the way it is, and how it all fits into the bigger storyline of the play itself. So when you start looking at this, you can look at yourself, and you can start by, for example, looking at your background. Where did you grow up? What was the nation, ethnic group, race, sex? What beliefs did people have around you? And can you see, for example, that your group of people, they had a certain story of who they were, what happened to them in the past, why they are in the situation they are in right now, what they can do about it, and what they can't do about it. Right? You will probably be able to see this. And so then you can start looking at this and you can say, okay, I'm a spiritual being. I realize now, I've been on the path for some time, I realize I'm a spiritual being. What does that mean? That means I came from somewhere beyond Earth, which means that I'm not defined by anything on Earth, which means that the spiritual path really can be seen as a process where I overcome any sense that there's something on Earth that defines who I am, what I can do, what I can't do. And obviously one of the things we have to overcome on Earth is our personal background in this life. How we were brought up, as I said, what story, what drama are the people around me outplaying? What drama was I programmed, brought up to take on? And think that I have to continue to outplay this drama. So this can be a good start to look at yourself. You can see many groups of people around the world where they have a very, very clear drama. This group defining itself in opposition to the other group, and the other group defining itself in opposition to the first group. And these two groups of people have been locked in this struggle for centuries, maybe even millennia. There are literally areas of the world where two groups of people have been locked in a struggle against each other for thousands of years. So obviously as a spiritual person, this is not something you want to have eat up your life. You have to find a way to free yourself from this, and therefore it can be helpful to look at what is the story, what's the drama that's outplayed, what role was I brought up to take on in this drama, and is this really who I want to be for the rest of my life? And then you can realize, as I've said, that as you were growing up, as you were exposed to this programming, you created these subconscious selves. And it's a matter of coming to see these selves and say, but this is not who I want to be. I don't want to drag this self with me anymore, so I'm following the procedure for letting it die, for just letting it fade away. Now, so this can be a good start, but as spiritual people, we realize, of course, most of us, that this is not our first lifetime. We have incarnated on Earth probably for many, many lifetimes before this one. So in those many lifetimes, we built a personal story, a personal drama that is beyond what we were exposed to in this lifetime. Now, it may be that we have incarnated in this lifetime in a specific group of people that we also incarnated with in previous lifetimes. So indeed, the drama we were brought up to take on may be something we carried with us from past lifetimes as well. But even beyond this, when you really start going deeper into your personal story, you realize that you have a story that goes way back. And it's the story of how do we as spiritual people deal with planet Earth. Because as I've said before, and as I've explained in my How the World Works videos, Earth is an unnatural planet. And it's unnatural because, among other things, we have warfare, torture, crime, all of these negative things that are happening on Earth. And as spiritual people, most of us know this shouldn't be here. And you can probably think back to your childhood when you were first exposed to knowledge that there's, for example, war or torture or this or that, how you had a sense, but this shouldn't be here. Why is this happening? Why are people doing this to each other? And it was obvious to you that this shouldn't be here. And this is because as spiritual people, we have a reaction to planet Earth. There's actually, as I explained in some of my How the World Works videos, there's a large group of people, and most spiritual people fit into that category, who came to Earth a long time ago specifically to help the Earth grow beyond this level of being an unnatural planet. We were actually volunteering to come and embody here because we wanted to help raise the Earth and so it could become a natural planet again. And when we came, it was a very big shock for us to come to Earth. And I will talk more about this in some coming videos I'm going to make specifically about this topic. But what I want to say here is that many of us, when we start going back deeper into our psychology, we realize that when we first came to Earth, it was very traumatic for us. Just experiencing this planet, the density of matter, the density of the collective consciousness, what people do to each other, it was a shock, it was a trauma. It was literally we could call it a cosmic burst trauma, when we first realized what this planet really is, how dense it is, how difficult it is. And so many of us have built this personal story, this personal drama, based on this experience. And I remember myself when I first started realizing this, I started realizing that ever since I was a child, I had in my mind been outplaying this drama of how I would somehow be the prince on the white horse who would save the day, who would bring some kind of major change to society and eradicate some of these big problems like warfare or whatever it is. And I've known many, many spiritual people who have had that same sense. You have a sense that you're here to do something, and it is to make the earth a better place. And here's where it gets tricky, where it gets really, really tricky with this personal drama. Because, as I said, there's a large group of people who volunteered to come to Earth specifically to help raise the Earth above this level of being an unnatural planet. So there is a certain reality here that we are here. We are here to help improve the Earth. The problem is that after we received this burst trauma, most of us were so disturbed by this that we reacted so strongly that it brought us below the 48th level of consciousness into this illusion of separation. And the reality is that when we came here, we didn't come here as separate individuals. We came here as a group of people. We had a connection to the Ascended Masters who were part of what sent us here. And when we came here, we realized that we alone are not here to bring changes. We're here to bring changes as a group. And the changes we are here to bring is not specific outer changes. It's to raise the consciousness. So obviously part of why we're here is to remove war from Earth. But how do you remove war from Earth? Well, you could create the most powerful army ever seen and subdue all other armies and let this army maintain peace on Earth because it would destroy anyone who tried to create a rivaling army. But would that really be peace? So the only real way to remove war is to raise the collective consciousness so it becomes obvious to a majority of people that war is not constructive. And therefore you give it up voluntarily. I know this sounds naive to some people, but look at democracy. Why did democracy come into being? What's the advantage? For thousands of years you had societies that were dominated by a small power elite. Did that power elite want democracy? No. But there came a point where the collective consciousness has been raised. So a critical mass of people suddenly saw that it was obvious that we need to create a different kind of society where there isn't a power elite that can subdue the people, where the people have rights, and that where their government cannot take away these rights from the people. This just became obvious, and that's why we have democracy. Now, obviously, it hasn't become obvious to all people. That's why not all countries are democracies, but we do see an upward trend. So what I'm saying is, we are here to raise the collective consciousness, not bring specific changes. The changes will come as we raise the consciousness. And why is this important? Because when I look back at myself and many other spiritual people I met, we have created this personal story, this personal drama that is focused on bringing specific changes. So, for example, I always, as a child, was very disturbed by war. When I first realized what it was really disturbing to me. And so my goal for many years was remove war. After I find my first two spiritual teachings, my goal was to remove war. I was meditating to remove war. I was giving decrees and invocations to the Ascended Masters to remove war. And the problem here is actually very subtle. Because as I said, we are here to bring positive change. But how do we bring positive change? By raising the consciousness. How do we raise the consciousness? By raising our own consciousness. But what is it that creates the problems we have on Earth? It's what I've explained in my other videos. The illusion of separation, the duality consciousness, where people see themselves as separate individuals. You have to bring about a certain change. How do you do it? Well, there are these other people that won't do what you want them to do, so you have to somehow either force them or kill them. This is what I call the epic mindset, and it has led on a worldwide scale to all these epic battles, epic dramas that have been fought. Classical example is the Nazis in Germany in the 1930s, who thought they were representing the Aryan race, the superior race, the pure race, and it was their epic quest to raise up this Aryan race to dominate the world and to eradicate those who were of the impure races. This is the typical epic drama. So what I'm saying is, the real problem on Earth, what creates all of the specific problems you see, is this: the illusion of separation, the dualistic justifications, and the epic dramas that are created out of the duality consciousness that are then used to justify forcing or killing other people. This is the real problem on Earth. What are we here to do as spiritual people? We're here to help raise the Earth beyond that level of consciousness, raise the collective consciousness until people start to see these epic dramas and abandon them. And this has already started happening to some degree. There are many nations, especially in Europe, where after the Second World War, after the Holocaust became known, people saw the fallacy of this epic drama outplayed by the Nazis, and they used this to say we can never allow something like this to happen again. So there has been a certain progress, but obviously it hasn't broken through all over the world. So what I'm trying to say is, we are here to help raise the Earth above this epic consciousness. How do we do it? By raising ourselves above the epic consciousness. And that means we have to be willing to look at what are our own dramas, our own stories that go back to this birth trauma we received when we came to Earth. Many of us were severely persecuted personally when we came to Earth because we were seen as a threat to what I've called the fallen beings in my How the World Works videos. So we have this deep trauma, and this is what gives us this personal drama we're outplaying. For me, as I said, it was, I'm here to help remove war from the Earth. And when I found the spiritual path, I thought, well, this is what I can use the spiritual path for. This is why I found the spiritual path. I have to remove war. So I gave all of these decrees to the Ascended Masters to remove war. But for a long time, I wasn't able and willing to look at myself and say, do I have some of the same consciousness in me that creates war, that leads to war? Am I still having some of these subconscious selves that are based on the duality consciousness, based on the illusion of separation? Do I think that I, as a separate being, have to do something to other separate beings in order to remove war? And so it took me a long time to be willing to acknowledge that, yes, I did. I did have these subconscious selves, and they were not helping to raise the consciousness of the Earth. And I could give all of the decrees to the Ascended Masters I wanted. But as long as I still had these subconscious selves in my own mind, I wasn't really helping to raise the consciousness beyond war. And so what eventually happened to me was that I came to a point where I was willing to acknowledge this, I was willing to look at it, and work on these selves, and gradually come to see that if I really wanted to do what I was here to do, I had to overcome these selves. I simply had to overcome them. And as I said, how do you overcome a self? Well, I had a self that said, we have to remove war. The goal is to remove war. You cannot be at peace with yourself until war is removed from Earth. So, first of all, this self, you could say, it's not an impossible quest, but it's probably a long-term quest, right? War is probably not going to be removed within the next couple of years. So, I was condemning myself to be not at peace for the rest of this lifetime. And this, of course, is not constructive for your spiritual growth. But the other thing is that I wasn't helping to pull up the collective, because I still saw that I, as a separate being, I have to do something. I have a goal I have to accomplish. That goal means other people have to change. So I, as a separate being, have to find a way to make other people change. But this is the same consciousness that leads to war. War is just the extreme outcome of thinking that you, as a separate being, have to get other separate beings to change. This is the whole consciousness that's the problem. And so what these selves do is they project, there's a problem that must be solved. And this problem involves the free will of other people. So this means what? It means that I, even though I saw myself as a spiritual being, who was, I was thinking, I was working to raise my own consciousness, but I was letting my spiritual growth depend on the choices of other people. And I came to this realization that this is completely backwards. If I am really wanting to grow spiritually, if I really want to raise my consciousness, I cannot let my growth depend on the choices of other people. That means what? It means I have to look at, why do I think I have to change the minds of other people? And that was because I had a subconscious self that was based on the illusion of separation, thought I'm here to help remove war. So the whole focus was removing war, and this means other people have to change. So I was always projecting out. Other people have to change. I was not looking in, looking at how do I need to change. And so I came to this realization gradually that, no, I need to look at myself. I need to first change myself. I need to even overcome this self that I think the only way to remove war is to change other people. The only way for me to help remove war is to change myself, so I go beyond the mindset that leads to war. This is what I need to focus on. And so I did this for a period of time. And the trick about this, the trick about overcoming these selves, is to realize they're always projecting there is an outer result that needs to be achieved. And therefore they're pulling you, the conscious self, into thinking, I have to focus on achieving this outer result. But the reality of the whole situation is, no, it is not about the outer result. It's about the self that you have in your consciousness. That's what needs to change. And there's only one way to do this. That is to say, I don't care about the outer result. I only care about being free of this self. And therefore you have to give up your desire to create this outer change. And you have to say, I'm willing to let this self die. I'm willing to let go of the idea that I'm here to achieve something on earth. Even if I don't achieve this outer result, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to let that self die. And then the self is not going to like this. The self is going to resist this with all the power it has over your mind. It's going to be kicking and screaming that you can't just do this. You can't abandon your goal. This is the whole purpose why you came to earth. If you abandon this purpose, there is no point in you being here. All of these things. I heard my separate self scream like this for months about this. But you come to that point where you realize it's all based on an illusion. Now take care here. It's not an illusion we're here to improve the earth. But we are here to improve the earth by raising consciousness, not by creating these specific outer results that involves forcing the free will of other people. This is the crucial difference. And so you can come to that point where you see this. You see that this is a separate self based on the illusion of separation that decided, I have to force other people to change. But it is this consciousness that creates all problems on earth. Some people are always trying to force others to change. It is this use of force that is the problem. So when you come to see this, you can look at this self, the conscious self can step outside the self, look at it and say, oh, I see the illusion. I see the illusion of separation. I see it as an impossible goal. I see how it prevents me from having peace of mind as long as I'm on earth. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be in this state of agitation, of stress, of focusing outside myself. I want to have peace of mind inside myself, and I see that the only way to do this is to stop focusing on the outer result and just let the self die. I just let it fade away. I stop feeding it my attention and my energy. I let it fade away. You can, of course, make calls to the Ascended Masters to transform the energy accumulated through that self, which might be a lot of energy that's accumulated over many lifetimes. But ultimately, you need to come to see that self and just say, I'm letting you die. I'm letting you die. And when you do this, it's an incredible sense of freedom. You actually probably won't even believe the difference this will make in your life. It has to be experienced. I can look back, and I'm not saying I don't have any subconscious selves left, but I can look back at certain subconscious selves that I have overcome. I can see the incredible strain, the incredible stress I was under while I was still colored by these subconscious selves. And now I can look at this and, oh my God, it's just such an incredible sense of freedom. Life is so much more joyful, and I don't have to change the world. I came to a point where I deliberately looked at myself, and I looked at how all of my life I had been focused on making these outer changes that involved changing other people. And I simply made a conscious decision. I said, I am resigning from the job of having to change other people. I'm resigning from that job. And then I realized, of course, who gave me that job to change other people? And for many years, if you had asked me this question, I would have said, well, the Ascended Masters did. That's why we came to Earth. We came to Earth to change the Earth, and that means changing people. But the reality I realized is it wasn't the Ascended Masters who gave me the assignment to change other people. It was the separate self based on the illusion of separation. Because when you go into separation, you can't see the whole point of raising consciousness. You think you have to change specific other people, change their behavior. And this is what led to the Nazis thinking that in order to manifest utopia on earth, you had to kill the Jews. Eradicate all the people who are against you, who are different from you. And this is, again, the consciousness of separation. So it was just an incredible relief to let go of this. And one of the reasons why it's a relief to let go of this is that it frees you from the pull of the mass consciousness. There is still many, many people on earth who believe that the only way to change the world is to change other people. So if you have a subconscious self based on this illusion, this whole conglomerate from the mass consciousness, all of the energy, all of the beliefs, it's going to pull on you. It's like Jesus said, the prince of this world cometh and has nothing in you, in me, because you've overcome the self. But as long as you have the self, the prince of this world has something in you. The demons of Mara has something they can use to force you to react. And it will burden you. It will be a constant stress on you. I can look back and see how much of a stress I was under when I was younger, especially after I found my second spiritual teaching, where I realized that I can work with the Ascended Masters. But it was an enormous stress for me in the first many years, because I felt this huge responsibility. I have to single-handedly save the world and be the prince on the white horse. And resigning from that position is probably the greatest relief I've experienced on the spiritual path. So I hope this has given you some ideas that you can use to start looking at your personal story, your personal drama, and free yourself from it.